Father, what are we to make of the fact that Father Seraphim Rose was received in the church via Chrismation, yet many miracles attributed to his intercession? This is like the 15th time I've answered this question. I'm happy to answer it again, but, hopefully this will help everybody and we don't have to keep coming back to this topic. So Father Seraphim Rose is clearly shown to be by God in many ways a holy man. We revere his memory, his witness, his struggle, the progress he made in such a short amount of time, his prophetic word, all of that. I've been very involved in spreading his memory throughout the Orthodox Church. I helped translate life into Greek. I wrote the preface to the Greek life. I wrote the preface to his book on St. Augustine. I wrote the preface in Greek to the life of St. John. I was the translator for Father Damascene when he came and spoke all throughout Greece. So I'm very much indebted to Father Seraphim Rose. His life was transformative for me. And have that in mind when I tell you the following. His reception by Chrismation is an exception to the rule. In spite of the error of his reception by Chrismation, God blessed him abundantly. God is not bound by our mistakes. And seeing his great zeal and love, I believe God gave him an abundance of grace. That is not a precedent for bad theology and a departure from the patristic consensus on what are the presuppositions of reception. That does not become a precedent. We don't take individual examples throughout church history and build a case for our theology. That is bad Orthodox theology. We don't do that. The order of things is revelation, Christology, ecclesiology, the patristic understanding of the church. And in that context, we look at the pastoral work of the church, not the other way around. We don't look at practices, church history, and then interpret what we understand to be the church, which is what they're doing again and again and again. And good people are making this very error. Again, you don't go to church history to do theology. You don't go and say, well, there was a council here and a council there. 1667 council in Russia did X, Y, Z. Therefore, we believe X. That's not how you do it. It's not how any church father did it, because there are false councils. There are councils that the church is ambiguous about. There's councils where the particular pastoral decisions are not precedents or applicable throughout church history. We don't do that. The saints didn't do that. What we do is we go to the patristic consensus, we go to the ecumenical councils, the canons of the church as a whole. We acquire the mind of the church, we enter into the life of the church, and then we understand living the life of the church and acquiring the mind of the church. We understand what the church is, we experience the life of the church, and then we turn and we interpret the pastoral work. And first of all, we determine this was actually God-inspired pastoral work. Here is a bad example in church history. How many times do people call upon bad examples in church history to try to prove a doctrinal or canonical point? And it's a non sequitur. It's pointless. You cannot, if you want to go, and this happens all the time, the proof texting of papists in terms of supporting the papacy. We have Orthodox doing the same thing right now in English America with the question of reception of converts and the question of whether per se we recognize outside the church mysteries, which of course we don't. It's absurd. The church fathers never entertained that doctrinal idea, theology. That was not a patristic teaching. There are so many examples of church fathers clearly saying and teaching such that would be impossible, right? But there are examples here and there and interpretations, but that's the kind of proof texting that anybody can do. Like, you can become a smart academic and proof text anything you want and prove it as a church teaching. That's not what the saints did. Go to contemporary saints. What did they teach? Not what did they do only, but what did they teach? And as a consensus, as the church embracing that patristic teaching. The only example we have for the modern church embraced in council and in the canons is St. Nicodemus' Pedalion, which was embraced by the Ecumenical Patriarchate and all of the local churches in the East, the local patriarchates, embraced by being translated again, embraced by being used for 200 years. And the church said, this book is blessed and used and is authoritative. This Pedalion, this book of canons with this interpretation by St. Nicodemus. And then they glorified St. Nicodemus 200 years, almost 150 years after his repose. If they didn't think his interpretations were the best, they would have glorified him as a saint. The church embraced him, embraced the Kolivadis fathers. It's such a tragedy to see people running after academic theologians as authoritative and putting aside the saints and their teaching and the patristic consensus. Father Seraphim, soon to be, I hope, Saint Seraphim or Saint Elizabeth or other exceptions in which economy was applied poorly, not on the patristic basis, is neither here nor there, and not a precedent and not a proof text for what we should do in terms of our understanding of ecclesiology and then pastoral application of economy, which are inseparable, right? From the one, you go to the next. Within the right ecclesiology, then you understand the pastoral practice. They want to take the pastoral practice and make a new ecclesiology in ecumenism, but also among our Latinized friends who are converting to Orthodoxy, bringing the baggage of a very scholastic approach to this question with them into the church. And it's not going to work. The saints don't embrace it. St. Iakovos famously said, and I can't wait till we get our book out and this is in there in translation, when they went to him and said, so we have this, I think it was a Spaniard, I think it was, or maybe it was from Italy, I don't remember, and he's being catechized, and what should we do, St. Iakovos, how should we receive him to the church? And he said, well, go to the bishop and then come back to me. He goes to the bishop, and he actually said, go to the bishop, and the bishop will take care of everything, don't worry, it's all going to be great. And then he goes, and the bishop won't even see him, and then he sends him, and he's just a message from his secretary, no need to baptize him, just chrismate him. The Church of Greece decided that we should chrismate him. He goes back to St. Iakovos. And they say, oh, well, what happened with the bishop? And they say, well, this is what happened with the bishop. Oh, really? Uh-huh. Well, I don't know what the Church of Greece Holy Synod said, but I know what the gospel says. Those who believe should be baptized. Believe and be baptized. So we're going to baptize you. That's Saint Iakovos, okay? The God-seer, the wonder worker, the one who was glorified by the ecumenical patriarchate and embraced by the whole church, who lived the days. You're going to tell me, no, he needs to go back and he needs to read, so-and-so's interpretation of the canons because he got it wrong. I just stand in awe of people who come and they say, how could St. Iakovos not listen to the Holy Synod? Are you serious? Like, is that your understanding of the saints? They're just rebellious or something? Or do you think they actually see and understand spiritually? We have yet to understand the saints if we don't get this. There are many examples throughout church history of bad teachings by bishops and holy synods. Here is something that we're getting wrong, really needs to drive it home. Everyone needs to follow the saints. Everyone needs to follow the Holy Fathers, including the bishops, including the priests, including the theologians in the academic world. We all need to follow the saints, and not the saints generally, but the saints of our day, the saints of our time, and going backward in time. And we need to follow the consensus of the saints. So when St. Iakovos or St. Nicodemus or St. Paisios or St. Pais Veleskovsky or the Holy Kolivadis fathers or whatever, soon to be St. Ephraim of America, if they teach that you need to be baptized and the presuppositions don't exist for chrismation, that's what the whole church needs to embrace. You're going to say, well, I know saints who taught something differently. But that's not the saints that the church embraced in Pedalion, in council, and the consensus of the saints. That's not the expression of the ecclesiology and pastoral application. Of course, we're going to have examples that are not going to fit into that. Not every saint said everything, and not every saint said everything right. There are saints who said stuff, but the church didn't look to them and say, you spoke, like they said about Leo, for instance, in the Fourth Ecumenical Council, or St. Athanasius the Great on the Incarnation, or St. Maximus on the two natures, or St. Theodore, or whoever it might be on the icons. there are certain saints who spoke and they expressed the mind of the church. And the church said, St. Mark, St. Gregory Palamas has spoken. This is the church. And the church embraced his teaching, and it became the teaching of the Orthodox Church. It's on that level that we're talking about this whole question of reception. Where do we look? We look to Father Florovsky. We look to Fidas. Who do we look to? The saints. And the saints who've spoken and been embraced by the other saints. So our saints embrace St. Nicodemus today, right? They don't go, oh, no, St. Nicodemus got that wrong. We don't need to follow St. Nicodemus. He got that wrong. No, they don't. Father Cosmas went to Africa and said, I want the blessing of St. Nicodemus. I'm baptizing. Elder St. Paisios said to Father Cosmas, baptize everyone. Don't make sure, because the water only pours over their skin from the heterodox. St. Paisios said that to Father Cosmas, who was an Athonite missionary and a saint himself. So follow the saints. The exception is not the rule. Father Seraphim, in spite of the error, was made a holy man, and God can do whatever he likes. He used Balaam to teach the truth about the Israelites, and he was an idol worshiper, and he was a deceitful one at that. And he spoke through Balaam's ass. All right, so if he can do that, he can certainly overcome the errors of reception. We're not going to make a precedent from an exception and an error that was committed under the weight of scholastic theology. A few years after Father Seraphim was chrismated, and some people say he was baptized, but anyway, the general consensus is he was chrismated. What did he do? He became a priest and he baptized everybody. He didn't chrismate anyone. He baptized everybody that came to him. And that's what the church abroad taught in council, and they corrected that error that was going on because they understood what was going on. The presuppositions were not being met. And they said, no, we're not going to do that in this day and age of ecumenism. We're not going to walk that path, which is going to undermine the boundaries of the church.